She always chose the back pew. Not because it was closer to the door and not because she arrived late. She chose it because it allowed her to exist without being noticed. From the back, she could lower her head, fold her hands, and let the world pass over her like a quiet wind. Most people in the church knew her face but not her name. They knew her as the quiet woman. The one who never spoke during fellowship. The one who never laughed loudly or cried openly. She moved through the church like a shadow, present but distant. Her clothes were always clean but worn thin. The fabric had softened with age like something handled too often. Her shoes made almost no sound as she walked. Everything about her seemed careful, as if she feared taking up too much space in the world. Her life outside the church was small and heavy. Each morning she woke before the sun, her body stiff from sleep that never felt deep enough. She washed her face with cold water and stared at her reflection longer than she meant to. There was always a pause, as if she expected the mirror to accuse her of something. She lived simply. Too simply. Food was measured. Money was counted twice before being spent once. Some nights she went to bed hungry, telling herself that hunger made prayer stronger. Loneliness was her closest companion. She had once known warmth, laughter, a sense of belonging. But those things had slipped away quietly over the years, leaving behind a silence that followed her everywhere. People drifted from her life, or maybe she drifted from them. She was never quite sure. The church was the only place where the silence did not feel cruel. Inside those old walls the air felt steady. The wooden pews creaked softly, like they remembered every prayer ever spoken there. Candles burned with patient flames. Sunlight passed through stained glass and painted the floor with colors that felt holy, even on the darkest days. She trusted this place. She believed that whatever weight she carried could not enter here without permission. That inside these walls she was protected, watched over, forgiven, at least in theory. Yet even here, something inside her refused to rest. There was a memory she avoided. A moment from long ago that sat deep in her chest, buried under years of routine and quiet obedience. She did not name it. Naming it made it real. And real things demanded answers. So she prayed instead. Her prayers were simple. Sometimes they were barely words at all. Just thoughts released into the air, hoping someone was still listening. Faith was all she had left. When life had taken everything else, comfort, certainty, connection, faith remained. Even when doubt crept in, she clung to it. Even when she felt unworthy, she showed up. That morning she entered the church like she always did. She dipped her fingers into the holy water. She crossed herself. She walked to the back pew and sat down, folding her hands tightly in her lap. But something felt wrong. The air seemed heavier than usual, pressing gently against her chest. The quiet felt sharper, almost watchful. The candles flickered even though no breeze touched them. She shifted slightly, uncomfortable. As the service began, her heart started to beat faster. There was no reason for it. Nothing had changed. And yet everything felt different. She bowed her head, closed her eyes, and tried to focus. Her palms tingled faintly. She opened her eyes and rubbed her hands together, blaming the cold. But the sensation did not fade. It lingered, subtle but present, like a warning she could not hear clearly. A strange unease settled in her stomach. She told herself she was imagining things. Hunger could do that. So could fear. She had lived with fear for years. It was nothing new. Still, her thoughts drifted. She remembered moments she wished she could forget. Choices she had made when she believed no one was watching. Times when silence felt safer than truth. Her chest tightened. She pressed her hands together harder, as if holding herself in place. The priest's voice echoed through the church, calm and steady, but the words slipped past her. She could not focus. Her breath felt shallow. Her skin prickled with a strange awareness, like the room itself was paying attention to her. For the first time in years she felt exposed. Not to people, but to something deeper. Something that knew her. She swallowed and forced herself to breathe slowly. This is still a safe place, she told herself. It always has been. But deep down a quiet fear stirred. Faith had always been her refuge. What if it was about to become something else? As the service continued, she remained in the back pew, silent and still. To anyone watching, she looked the same as always, calm, humble, devoted. But inside her, something had begun to shift. And she did not yet know that this ordinary day was already slipping into something far from ordinary. The service ended the same way it always did, quietly and without hurry. People rose from their seats, murmured soft greetings, and slowly made their way toward the doors. Shoes brushed against the stone floor. Coats were lifted. The outside light spilled in, bright and warm, before the heavy doors closed again. She remained seated. She often did. She liked the moment after everyone left. The church felt honest then, stripped of noise and movement. Just stone, wood, and silence. A place where she could breathe without pretending. She waited until the last echo of footsteps faded before standing. Her legs felt stiff, her chest still tight from the strange unease she could not explain. She smoothed her dress and turned toward the aisle, ready to leave. That was when she saw it. A single coin lay on the floor near the front pew. It caught the light in a dull way, not shiny or new, just enough to be noticed. It sat alone on the cold stone, as if it had fallen there and been forgotten. She stopped walking. Coins were common things. They passed through hands every day. They rolled under tables and sank into pockets without thought. There was nothing special about this one, and yet it felt wrong. The coin did not belong there. She glanced toward the doors. The church was empty. No one had dropped it in her sight. No one would return for it. Her first thought was to leave it. It was not hers. Someone else would find it. The caretaker would sweep it up later. That was the right thing to do. But her feet did not move. Her stomach tightened in a familiar way. Hunger whispered softly. A coin could buy bread. Maybe even a small meal. She pictured the thin shelf in her kitchen, the way it looked too empty too often. Shame followed quickly, sharp and heavy. This was God's house. She folded her hands as if to keep them from acting on their own. Her heart beat faster. She felt small standing there, caught between need and fear. It's just a coin, she told herself. But it was never just a coin. She took a slow step forward. Then another. Each step felt louder than the last, even though the church remained silent. She knelt down slowly, her knees touching the cold floor. The stone sent a chill through her dress. She hesitated, her fingers hovering inches above the coin. For a brief moment she thought of leaving it there. Then her fingers closed around it. Pain exploded through her hand. It was instant and fierce, like fire biting deep into her skin. Heat surged through her palm, sharp and burning, far stronger than anything she had ever felt. A gasp tore from her throat as she jerked her hand back. The coin slipped from her fingers and struck the floor with a sharp sound, rolling once before stopping exactly where it had been. Her heart pounded wildly. She clutched her hand to her chest, trembling. The pain throbbed, spreading through her fingers, pulsing with a life of its own. She stared at her palm, breath shallow, expecting to see smoke or blood. There was nothing. No burn. No mark. Just skin, unbroken, untouched. Her mind raced. Had she imagined it? She looked around the empty church, her eyes wide, her pulse loud in her ears. No one was there to witness her fear. No one to explain what had happened. Slowly she lowered her hand. The pain still lingered, hot and deep beneath the surface, as if something had branded her from the inside. Embarrassment washed over her, even though she was alone. She pulled her sleeve down, hiding her hand as if someone might appear at any moment. As if the church itself might be watching. She stood quickly, her movements clumsy. The coin remained on the floor. Unmoved. Untouched. Ordinary. She took a step back, then another. Her breath shook as she turned toward the exit. Her hand burned with every heartbeat. She did not look at the coin again. But even as she pushed open the heavy doors and stepped into the sunlight, she felt it behind her. Waiting. By the time she reached home, the pain had grown sharper. It was no longer a quick sting or passing heat. It throbbed deep inside her hand, steady and cruel, like a pulse that refused to slow. Each step she took sent a fresh wave of pain through her fingers. She unlocked her door with her uninjured hand and stepped inside her small room. The space felt colder than usual, though the air had not changed. She set her bag down and unwrapped her sleeve slowly, afraid of what she might see. Her palm was red. Not lightly flushed, but dark and angry, as if heat had been trapped beneath her skin. Tiny blisters had begun to rise, painful and tight. She sucked in a breath, her chest tightening with fear. She rushed to the sink and ran cold water over her hand. The relief lasted only seconds before the burning returned, stronger than before. She wrapped her hand in cloth, pressing it gently, hoping pressure might calm it. It did not. That night, sleep came in short, broken pieces. Every time she drifted off, the pain dragged her back. Her hand burned under the blanket, and she kept it away from her body, afraid it might spread. By morning, the blisters had grown. She went to a clinic later that day, her hand hidden beneath a scarf. The doctor examined it carefully, his face serious but confused. He asked about fire, chemicals, accidents. She shook her head. No explanation fit. The wound did not behave like a normal burn. It was too deep, too precise. It seemed to pulse, almost as if it responded to her thoughts. She left with ointments that did nothing. Days passed. The pain did not fade. Instead, it settled into her hand, constant and heavy. The skin cracked. The ache crawled into her wrist, slow and deliberate. Fear took root. At night, her dreams turned dark. She dreamed of fire falling from the sky, of coins raining down, glowing red, burning through the ground as they landed. She dreamed of reaching out to stop them, only to wake with her hand on fire and her heart racing. She began to remember old sermons she had heard but never fully listened to. Words about sacred ground, about offerings meant for holy purposes, about the danger of touching what was not meant for you. The memories unsettled her. She stopped going to church. The thought of returning filled her with dread. The place that once comforted her now felt dangerous, as if the walls might close in around her. She feared the altar, feared the quiet. She prayed at home instead, kneeling beside her bed, her injured hand held close to her chest. But when she prayed honestly, the pain sharpened. When she whispered words of faith without meaning them, the pain stayed the same. And when she lied to herself, when she told herself nothing was wrong, the wound seemed to grow angry, burning hotter, as if it rejected her denial. She began to hide her hand more carefully. Long sleeves, gloves even in warm weather. She avoided people, avoided questions. Isolation wrapped around her like a second skin. One evening as she cleaned the wound, she noticed something that made her breath catch. The burn had spread. Only slightly. Only enough to be noticed by someone who watched it closely. But it was there. A thin line of red creeping toward her wrist, as if following an invisible path. Her stomach dropped. Burns healed. They did not move. She pressed her lips together, fighting panic. Her mind searched for answers. Illness, infection, anything that made sense. Nothing did. She remembered the moment her fingers closed around the coin. Not the pain. The thought that came before it. The need. The desire. She sat back on her bed, clutching her wrapped hand and stared at the floor. Her breathing grew shallow. "What have I done?" she whispered, though no one answered. That night she did not sleep at all. She sat awake, watching the shadows stretch and shrink as the moon moved across the room. Her hand burned steadily, refusing to let her forget its presence. By morning, she knew the truth she had been avoiding. This was not an accident. This was not an illness. This was not something medicine could fix. Whatever had touched her in that church had not let go. And for the first time she understood that the pain was not random. It was personal. The pain had a way of pulling memories out of hiding. Each time her hand burned, a picture from the past surfaced, unwanted, sharp, and clear. At first she tried to push them away. She told herself that memory was cruel, that it fed on fear. But the more she resisted, the stronger the memories became. They came to her late at night, when the room was quiet and her thoughts had nowhere else to go. She remembered a time when her life felt fuller. Back then she had believed in the future. She had trusted people easily. She laughed more. She walked without watching her back. Faith was something warm and natural, not something she clung to in desperation. There had been love once. Not perfect love, but hopeful. A shared dream of building something honest and lasting. She had believed that goodness alone was enough to protect her. Then life pressed in. Work became scarce. Bills piled up. Promises were broken, some by others, some by her. Fear slowly replaced trust, and need began to whisper louder than conscience. The memory she avoided most returned again and again. It was a day much like any other. The church had been busy. People had given offerings meant for repairs, for helping the poor, for keeping the doors open. She had volunteered to help collect and organize what was given. She had been trusted. No one watched her closely. No one suspected her of anything. That was when the choice appeared. It was small, quiet, almost invisible. She had seen the money and thought of her own empty cupboard, her own unpaid bills, her own hunger. The thought came easily, just this once. I will return it later. She told herself it was not theft, just borrowing, just survival. She took it. Not much. Enough to matter. Enough to stain. She had waited for guilt to crush her right away. It did not. Days passed. Then weeks. Life continued. The money was never returned. Something always came up. Another need. Another excuse. Eventually, the memory faded into the background of her life, pushed aside by loss and hardship. But it never disappeared. It settled inside her, quiet and patient. After that, everything seemed to unravel. The relationship she had cherished broke apart under the weight of unspoken truths. People she loved drifted away. Opportunities closed without warning. She told herself it was bad luck. Timing. Fate. But deep down she wondered. She began to feel unworthy of good things, unworthy of being seen, unworthy of joy. So she grew quiet. She showed up to church not to heal but to hide. She sat in the back pew, bowed her head, and let faith become a shield instead of a mirror. She prayed often but never honestly. Her prayers were careful, polite, safe. She asked for protection, for strength, for forgiveness in general terms. Never for the thing that burned in her chest. She believed that if she stayed silent long enough, God would forget. Years passed that way. Outwardly she survived. She worked. She ate. She slept. She aged. But inside, something remained broken. Now, as the burn in her hand throbbed, the truth became impossible to ignore. The pain sharpened whenever she thought of that day. Whenever she remembered the money folded into her pocket. Whenever she felt again the relief and the shame that followed. Her hand seemed to know what her mouth had never admitted. The burn flared as if reacting to the memory itself. She pressed her injured hand against her chest and gasped, tears rising without warning. Her body shook with the effort of holding herself together. This is why, she thought, fear and understanding twisting together. The coin on the church floor had not been random. It had been familiar. A reminder shaped like temptation. The pain did not come because she touched the coin. It came because she recognized it. Because something inside her still believed she had the right to take what was not meant for her. She sank to her knees beside her bed, her breath uneven. For the first time in years she stopped pretending. The church had never been her refuge from the truth. It had been the place where the truth waited. Her attendance had not been devotion. It had been avoidance. And now, her body carried the weight of what her heart had refused to confess. The burn surged again, strong and relentless, spreading heat through her palm as if to mark the realization into her flesh. She cried quietly, covering her mouth with her uninjured hand. I never made it right, she admitted, though the words stayed inside her. She had taken something sacred. She had hidden it. And she had lived as if silence could erase consequence. Now she understood. The coin was not just a coin. It was a memory given shape. A test returned. And the pain in her hand was not punishment alone. It was a summons. After the truth surfaced in her mind, the world around her began to change. Or maybe it had always been this way and she had only just learned how to see it. Small things happened at first. Easy to ignore. Easy to explain away. A coin appeared on the ground outside her door one morning. She froze when she saw it, her heart pounding hard enough to hurt. It was dull and ordinary, just like the one in the church. She stepped around it, refusing to look down for too long. Later that day, she found another coin resting on the edge of the sink in a public washroom. No one else seemed to notice it. No one claimed it. It felt placed rather than dropped. Each time she saw one, her injured hand pulsed sharply, as if reacting before her mind could. The burning smell came next. It followed her into quiet places, empty buses, narrow hallways, late-night rooms. There was no smoke, no flame, but the scent of something scorched lingered in the air, thick and heavy. It reminded her of heated metal, of something once solid being changed by fire. She washed her clothes. She cleaned her room. The smell returned anyway. At night, shadows stretched along the walls of her room, moving slowly, bending where they should not. She told herself it was exhaustion. Pain could do strange things to the mind. But her heart knew better. When she prayed, something strange happened. She did not hear voices. No words filled her ears. Instead, she felt sensations. Pressure behind her eyes, warmth in her chest, a tightening around her throat. It was as if the prayers pressed back against her, demanding more than she was willing to give. Her hand burned brightest during those moments. If she prayed honestly, admitting her fear and regret, the pain sharpened but did not spread. It stayed contained, focused, as if listening. But when she avoided the truth, when she asked for comfort without responsibility, the burn flared wildly, crawling through her palm and up her wrist. The pain did not lie. It reacted to denial. She began to fear her own thoughts. Fear what might happen if she spoke the truth fully, even in silence. So she prayed less, thought less, felt less. Still the signs continued. One afternoon, as she stood in line at a shop, she felt eyes on her. She glanced down and realized her sleeve had slipped, exposing the edge of the burn. A woman nearby stared, her face tightening. Another person took a step back as if heat radiated from her skin. No one said anything. But the distance they kept told her enough. She pulled her sleeve down quickly, shame flooding her face. The burn throbbed again, deep and slow. The church, once her refuge, now haunted her thoughts. When she passed it on the street, her chest tightened. The bells sounded louder than before, heavy and low, as if calling her by name. She tried to enter once, standing at the door with her hand wrapped tightly in cloth. The moment she stepped inside, the pain surged so fiercely she nearly cried out. The air felt thick, pressing against her skin. The familiar scent of candles made her dizzy. She turned and left, trembling, her heart racing. The place that once hid her now rejected her silence. That night, she dreamed of fire again. This time, the flames did not fall from the sky. They rose from the ground, forming paths she was meant to follow. Coins lay embedded in the earth, glowing faintly, leading her forward. She woke before reaching the end, her hand burning brighter than ever. Exhaustion settled into her bones. She sought answers wherever she could without speaking the truth aloud. She read old religious texts. She listened to sermons online. She searched for meaning in symbols and stories. They all pointed to the same thing. Sacred things were not dangerous on their own. They became dangerous when touched with false hearts. Slowly, painfully, a realization formed. The wound was not meant to destroy her. It was meant to expose her. Each sign, each sensation, each warning pulled her closer to a truth she had avoided for years. Not to shame her, but to force her to face what she had buried. The burn was not growing to punish her. It pulsed when she lied. It calmed when she accepted responsibility. It guided her more clearly than any voice ever could. Late one evening, she sat alone in her room, her injured hand resting open on her lap. The pain was steady but not wild. She watched the flicker of candlelight on the wall and finally understood. This was not a curse. This was a calling. A demand for honesty. And the longer she ran from it, the louder the signs would become. She closed her eyes, her breath shaking. The truth was waiting. And it would not wait forever. She returned to the church at night. Not because she felt ready, but because she could no longer stay away. The streets were quiet, the air cool against her skin. Each step toward the church felt heavier than the last, as if the ground itself resisted her. Her hand burned steadily beneath the cloth wrapped around it, a reminder that turning back was no longer an option. The church doors were unlocked. That alone unsettled her. She pushed them open slowly, the familiar creak echoing through the empty space. Inside, the darkness felt deeper than she remembered. Only a few candles burned near the altar, their light trembling against the walls. She stood just inside the doorway, breathing carefully. The pain in her hand sharpened, then settled as if acknowledging where she stood. She walked forward. Every sound felt louder, her footsteps, her breath, the soft hum of silence. She reached the front pew, her eyes drawn to the spot where the coin had once lain. It was gone. The floor was bare. Plain. Ordinary. And yet she could feel it. Not the coin itself, but what it had carried. The air there felt warmer, heavier, as if something invisible still rested on the stone. She knelt slowly, ignoring the protest in her hand. For a long moment she stayed there, staring at the empty space. This is where it happened, she thought. Not just the burn. Not just the pain. The choice. Her mind began to piece things together in a way it never had before. The coin had not appeared by accident. It had not burned her because it was evil or cursed. It had burned because of what it represented, what it reflected back at her. She remembered stories she had heard growing up. Stories about offerings meant for sacred work. About money given with pure intent, and money taken with false hearts. She realized then that the coin on the floor had likely been part of an offering. Dropped unknowingly. Forgotten. Still sacred in purpose, even if overlooked by people. Its value was never in the metal. It was in the meaning. Her breath trembled as understanding settled over her like a weight. The coin burned her not when she touched it, but when she wanted it. The fire had not come from the coin. It had come from her. From the same place where guilt had slept for years. From the desire she had never fully surrendered. From the belief that need excused dishonesty. She looked down at her wrapped hand, her chest tight. Faith without honesty was empty. She had attended church faithfully. She had bowed her head. She had followed rituals and routines. But she had never brought her whole truth inside these walls. She had brought silence instead. The burn in her hand pulsed again, slower this time, deeper. It mirrored her guilt perfectly, not loud, not dramatic, but constant and unrelenting. She finally understood why the pain had grown worse when she lied to herself, and steadied when she faced the truth. Why the signs had followed her, not to frighten her, but to lead her here. The wound was not demanding punishment. It was demanding acknowledgement. Tears slipped down her face as the realization took hold. She pressed her forehead to the floor, her shoulders shaking. I know, she thought. I understand now. The truth was simple, and that made it unbearable. She had mistaken faith for cover. She had mistaken silence for repentance. She had believed that time could erase what honesty alone could heal. Slowly she unwrapped her hand. The burn glowed red in the candlelight, raw and painful. But for the first time it did not feel hostile. It felt present. Waiting. She held it out in front of her, palm open as if offering it back. The pain flared sharply, then eased. Just a little. Enough to notice. Her breath caught. The message was clear. The pain would not stop until she confronted the truth fully, not just in thought but in action. Not just in memory but in the world she had affected. Confession was coming. Not the kind spoken quickly to ease guilt. Not the kind whispered and forgotten. A full confession. One that required courage she was not sure she had. She sat back on her heels, exhausted, her mind racing. Fear rose up quickly, fear of judgment, of rejection, of losing what little peace she still had. But another feeling followed. Relief. For the first time since the burn began, she knew what was being asked of her. She did not have to guess anymore. The coin was never the enemy. It was the mirror. And now that she had seen herself clearly, there was no turning away. She wrapped her hand again and stood slowly, her body aching but lighter than before. The church no longer felt hostile. It felt quiet, patient. As she turned toward the door, she paused and looked back one last time at the place where the coin had rested. It was empty, but it had done its work. She stepped outside into the night, her heart heavy with what lay ahead, but steady in a way it had not been for years. She was not ready to confess aloud. Not yet. But she had made the most important decision of all. She would not hide anymore. She did not return home right away. Instead, she walked without direction, letting the night air press against her skin. The city around her felt distant, blurred, as if she moved through a world that no longer fully belonged to her. Her injured hand throbbed beneath its cloth wrapping, but the pain no longer surprised her. It felt expected. By the time she reached her room, exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders. She closed the door behind her and leaned against it, her breath shaking. The silence inside felt different now. Not empty. Waiting. She slid down to the floor and sat there for a long time, her back against the door, her knees drawn close to her chest. There was nowhere left to run. For years she had hidden behind routine. Behind quiet prayers and bowed heads. Behind the belief that silence could protect her. Now, stripped of those comforts, she felt exposed in a way she never had before. Slowly she unwrapped her hand. The burn was still there. Angry red, cracked and raw. The pain pulsed with each heartbeat, steady and unforgiving. She stared at it, her eyes filling with tears she no longer tried to stop. This is mine, she thought. I did this. The admission felt like a weight dropping from her chest. Painful but honest. She pressed her uninjured hand over her mouth as a sob escaped. Her body shook as years of held-back emotion broke free. Shame flooded her first, hot and suffocating. Shame for what she had taken. Shame for the lies she had told herself. Shame for the faith she had used as cover. Then came regret. She thought of the people she could have helped with the money she had taken. The repairs that might have been done sooner. The trust she had betrayed without ever being questioned. She had never faced the harm because she had never looked directly at it. Until now. Memories rushed in one after another. Not just the moment she took the money, but every moment after. Every prayer spoken without truth. Every time she felt unworthy and chose silence instead of honesty. Her chest ached with the weight of it. She wanted to speak. To say the words aloud. To name her sin and release it into the air. But no sound came. Instead, she bowed her head and let the confession happen inside her, fully and without defense. She did not explain. She did not justify. She did not soften the truth. She admitted everything. The burn in her hand reacted instantly. Pain surged through her palm, sharper than it had ever been. She cried out, clutching her hand to her chest as the sensation spread, fierce and overwhelming. Then slowly it changed. The pain steadied. It did not vanish, but it stopped growing. The fire no longer felt wild. It felt contained, as if it had reached the edge of its purpose. Her breathing slowed. She stayed there on the floor for a long time, her body trembling, her mind empty. When the tears finally faded, she felt hollow and lighter. The silence that followed was not cruel. It was gentle. She lay back on the floor and stared at the ceiling, her injured hand resting open beside her. The burn still glowed, still hurt, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a scar being earned. Images filled her mind again, but these were different. Moments of kindness she had received and ignored. Chances to do better she had passed by. Paths not taken. She did not turn away from them this time. She accepted them as part of her story. Responsibility settled into her bones, not as punishment but as truth. She understood something then that she had never allowed herself to understand before. Confession did not erase harm. It did not undo what had been taken. It did not restore trust by itself. It only opened the door. The weight that lifted from her chest was real, but the pain in her hand remained steady and present. It reminded her that honesty was only the beginning. Redemption would cost more. She sat up slowly, her muscles sore, her eyes swollen from crying. The room felt the same, but she did not. Something inside her had shifted, realigned. She wrapped her hand carefully and rose to her feet. For the first time, she did not hide the pain from herself. She knew what came next would be harder than silence. Facing people. Making things right. Accepting judgment without defense. The thought terrified her. But beneath the fear, something stronger stirred. Resolve. She walked to the small mirror on the wall and looked at her reflection. Her face was pale, her eyes red, but there was something else there now. Clarity. I will not lie anymore, she thought. The burn pulsed once, slow and firm. As if in agreement. She turned away from the mirror and began to prepare herself for what was coming, knowing now, without doubt, that confession without words had changed her, but it had not completed her journey. The truth had been spoken. Now it had to be lived. Morning came too quickly. Light crept through the thin curtains, touching the walls of her room with a softness that felt undeserved. She lay awake, her body heavy, her mind already racing. The burn in her hand had not faded overnight. If anything, it felt sharper in the morning light, as though daylight demanded honesty in a way darkness did not. She sat up slowly and unwrapped the cloth. The wound looked worse. The skin was swollen now, cracked along the edges, the center dark and raw. It frightened her, but it also strengthened her resolve. This was not something she could hide anymore. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that would not draw attention. Still, she left her hand uncovered. For the first time, she would not conceal it. Outside, the world moved on as usual. People hurried past her without looking, carrying bags, talking into phones, laughing. Their normalcy felt unreal, almost cruel. She made her way toward the church. Each step felt deliberate. She had rehearsed what she would say, but no words ever felt right. The truth, she knew now, would not sound clean or noble. It would be messy, uncomfortable, possibly unforgivable. When she reached the church grounds, her heart began to pound. The building stood as it always had, solid, familiar, indifferent to her fear. She hesitated at the door. Her hand burned sharply, as if reminding her why she was here. She went inside. The church was not empty. A few people sat scattered across the pews, heads bowed, murmuring prayers. Their quiet presence made her chest tighten. These were the people she feared disappointing the most. She walked forward, her footsteps echoing too loudly in her ears. Every eye seemed to turn toward her, though she could not be sure. She felt exposed, her uncovered wound pulsing in the open air. She approached the front, not the altar, but close enough that she could no longer retreat unnoticed. And then she stopped. Her courage faltered. Her mouth went dry. She looked at her hand again, at the burn that had followed her from the moment she picked up the coin. The memory of that heat grounded her. This pain had brought her here. It deserved to be honored. She did not speak. Instead, she raised her injured hand for all to see. The room grew still. Whispers began almost immediately. Confusion, concern, curiosity. Some leaned forward. Others looked away. She swallowed hard, her heart pounding, and finally spoke. Not excuses, not explanations. Just truth. She admitted what she had done. The money she had taken. The years she had remained silent. The guilt that had hollowed her faith. Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. She did not dramatize her pain. She did not ask for sympathy. She asked only to be heard. When she finished, the silence was heavy. No one rushed to comfort her. No one condemned her either. The pause felt endless. Then quietly someone stood. An older woman from the back pew. The same place she herself had once chosen to hide. The woman walked forward slowly, her face unreadable. She stopped in front of her and looked at the burn. "This is the cost," the woman said softly. "Nothing more." She nodded, tears filling her eyes. "Yes," she replied. "I know." More people stood then. Not to applaud. Not to praise. But to acknowledge. The priest approached next, his expression solemn. He listened as she repeated her confession, this time privately, fully. He did not minimize what she had done. He did not excuse it. He spoke instead about responsibility. About restitution. About the long road back to trust. She accepted it all. She agreed to repay what she had taken, even if it meant selling what little she owned. She agreed to step away from roles that required trust. She agreed to carry the weight of her actions without complaint. Each acceptance felt like another layer of skin being stripped away. And yet, the burn eased. Not dramatically, not instantly, but noticeably. By the time she left the church, her hand no longer throbbed with every heartbeat. The pain remained, but it had softened like a wound beginning finally to heal. Outside, the air felt lighter. People passed her again, unaware of what had just happened. She walked slowly, exhausted, drained but steady. Making things right had cost her comfort, pride, and certainty. But it had given her something she had not felt in years. Integrity. She looked down at her hand, still wounded, still scarred. This will stay, she thought. And she understood that it should. Healing did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, the way dawn does, not with light but with the gentle easing of darkness. At first she noticed it in the mornings. The fire that had once greeted her before she even opened her eyes was quieter. The sharp sting had softened into a dull ache. Some days it did not wake her at all. She did not celebrate. She had learned that healing was not a reward to be claimed, but a process to be respected. Still she watched carefully. The skin on her palm, once blistered and raw, began to settle. The redness faded into something calmer. The swelling eased. The pain loosened its grip, retreating inch by inch as if it were finally satisfied that its work had been done. But it did not leave completely. A mark remained. Darkened. Firm. Shaped like a reminder pressed into flesh. She touched it often, not out of fear now but awareness. The scar felt different from the rest of her hand. Less flexible. Less forgettable. Alive with meaning. For the first time in many weeks, she returned to church without dread. Not to prove anything. Not to be seen. Simply to stand where she once had and feel what was different. The doors opened with the same quiet groan. The air smelled the same, old wood, dust, and faint traces of incense. Sunlight filtered through the high windows, resting gently on the pews. But something had changed. The space no longer pressed in on her chest. The walls did not seem to watch her. The silence felt like rest instead of judgment. She walked slowly down the aisle, her steps steady. People noticed the scar. She did not hide it. When she passed the offering box, her heart tightened out of habit. Then loosened. She placed her envelope inside, not quickly, not nervously, but with calm intention. Her hand did not burn. Nothing happened. And that was the miracle. She sat among others this time. Not in the shadows. Not clinging to the back pew like a refuge. She sang softly when the hymns rose. Her voice was uneven but present. When prayers were offered, she bowed her head without fear of being exposed. For the first time she felt no need to bargain. Faith no longer felt like a shield she held up to protect herself from consequences. It felt like ground beneath her feet. After the service she lingered. She spoke to people she had avoided before. Some greeted her warmly. Some with uncertainty. A few with eyes that still held questions. She accepted all of it. Healing, she understood, did not erase memory in others. It only changed how she carried her own. That evening, alone in her small room, she unwrapped the bandage for the last time. The wound had closed. No fresh skin. No scab. Only the scar. She expected sadness. Instead, she felt something closer to reverence. The mark was not ugly. It was honest. It marked the place where desire had met truth. Where intention had been exposed. Where silence had finally lost its power. She remembered the sermons she had once half listened to. Words about sacrifice. About fire refining rather than destroying. About truth setting people free. They made sense now, not as ideas but as experience. She had believed faith was about avoiding wrong. She knew now it was about facing it. The scar changed how others treated her too. Some saw it as proof of strength. Others as evidence of failure. A few as something uncomfortable they preferred not to ask about. She let them see what they needed to see. She no longer carried the burden of controlling the story. In quiet moments she felt gratitude, not for the pain but for what the pain had uncovered. For the life she might have lived if she had never been confronted. For the false peace she would have mistaken for faith. The coin never returned. Not on the floor. Not in her dreams. Its work was finished. And yet its lesson lived on, in the scar that remained steady and undeniable. She understood now that sacred things do not exist to comfort lies. They exist to expose them. Not to shame but to heal. She slept peacefully that night. No fire. No whispers. No weight pressing down on her chest. Just the quiet presence of a woman who had stopped running from herself. The scar remained. And for the first time she was not afraid of what it said. It said she had faced the truth. It said she had paid the cost. It said healing was not the absence of marks, but the courage to live with them openly, faithfully, and without shame. And that was enough. Years later the scar was still there. It no longer burned. It no longer ached. But it had not faded the way ordinary wounds did. The skin on her palm remained slightly darker, tighter, shaped like a memory that refused to dissolve into time. She noticed it most in quiet moments. When she washed her hands in the morning. When she folded clothes. When she clasped them together in prayer. It never surprised her anymore. It simply reminded her. Life had grown steady in the years that followed her confession. Not easier, just honest. She lived smaller now, more deliberately. There were fewer comforts, fewer assumptions of belonging, but there was peace in knowing that what she carried was earned, not borrowed. The church still stood where it always had. She still attended, though she no longer chose the back pew. Not the front either. Somewhere in the middle, where she could see and be seen without hiding. Some people remembered. Some did not. And that, she had learned, was part of the cost too. She was no longer known as the quiet woman alone. Nor was she defined solely by her mistake. Instead, she became something quieter and truer, a person who had faced herself and not looked away. Children sometimes noticed the scar. They would stare openly, curiosity unburdened by judgment. Once in a while one would ask what happened. She never lied. "I learned something the hard way," she would say. They usually accepted that answer and ran off, satisfied. Adults asked less. But when they did, she chose honesty there too. Not dramatic confessions. Not rehearsed lessons. Just simple truth. "I did wrong," she would say. "And I chose to make it right." That was enough. The scar had changed how she moved through the world. She listened more. She spoke less, but with intention. When she gave carefully, not to ease guilt, not to be seen, but because generosity now felt sacred in a way it never had before. She no longer believed that good intentions mattered more than good actions. She had learned otherwise. Sometimes, in the stillness of late evening, she would sit alone and trace the scar with her thumb. Not in regret. In remembrance. She remembered the coin. Not the object, but the moment, the heat, the shock. The instant when her inner life collided with the truth she had avoided for years. She understood now that the coin had not punished her. It had awakened her. If she had ignored it, if she had dropped it and walked away laughing at the pain, dismissing it as coincidence, she might have lived her entire life believing she was faithful while remaining untrue. The scar had spared her that fate. That knowledge humbled her. There were days when she wished the mark would disappear. When she wanted her hand to look like everyone else's, unremarkable, unburdened. But those days grew fewer. Because the scar had become more than a reminder of failure. It was proof of transformation. It reminded her that faith was not about appearing pure. That repentance was not about secrecy. That forgiveness was not a feeling, but a path walked slowly, openly, and without shortcuts. She had learned that healing did not mean forgetting. It meant carrying truth without flinching. On the anniversary of her confession, she returned to the church alone. The building was empty that afternoon, quiet and cool. She walked to the place where the coin had once rested. The floor looked ordinary. Unmarked. No sign of what had happened there. She knelt anyway. Not to relive the pain, but to honor the turning point. She placed her scarred hand flat against the stone and closed her eyes. There was no heat this time. Only stillness. Gratitude rose in her chest, unexpected and deep. Gratitude for the wound that had not let her lie. Gratitude for the courage she had not known she possessed. Gratitude for a life rebuilt on truth rather than silence. She stayed there until the light shifted, then stood and left without ceremony. Outside, the world continued as it always had. People hurried past. Coins clinked in pockets. Small choices were made every moment, most unnoticed, some heavy with consequence. She understood now how fragile those moments were. How easily one choice could echo through a lifetime. As she walked home, her hand brushed against her coat pocket. Inside were a few coins from her change that day. She paused, pulled one out, and held it in her palm. It was cold. Harmless. Just metal. She smiled softly and slipped it back into her pocket, then continued on. The scar no longer frightened her. It guided her. It reminded her that truth, once faced, does not destroy, it clarifies. That integrity costs something, but never more than dishonesty does in the end. And that sometimes the smallest thing, a single coin on a cold floor, can become the moment that saves a soul. The scar remained, and she was grateful for it.